Hello everybody, this is Foster Johnson, the principal here at SFJ Academy, and today I'm working on a very special project. I'm building my own private island in Unity, Personal Edition. If you look on my screen here, I'm going to show you something very interesting. This is my island from the top. I'll zoom out a little bit so you can take a peek at it. And we'll go back into the free view, maybe rotate it around a little bit, come back in. You'll see it's got some water there. It has some terrain material. And I'm going to show you how to build your own island that you can explore. And then you can export it, put it online for your friends, and they can explore your island as well. The objective here is to build something that when you use your WASD keys, just like I'm doing right here, and I walk down the side of this hill, you see there's some nice ocean water off in the horizon. So how do we build all of this? Well, you're going to need a copy of Unity. And to do that, first, I'm going to have to get out of this view. So I'm going to go back from play mode, and I'll show you where you can find this. If you go to the web, and you type in http://unity3d.com. As soon as you get to Unity, there's going to be a Get Unity button right in the middle of that screen. When you click on Get Unity, there's a couple of options here. If you're new to Unity and you just want to learn how to use it, I would go with this free option right here. Why not? No credit cards required. You can get started right away. So, in 3 segments, I'm going to show you how to build that island, put some flora, we're going to put some grass down, we're going to put some trees down, and then we're going to put a player character down there so we can walk around our own private island. Step 1, however, is to download the free version. If you already have it, you're ready to go. So I'm going to do this in 3 segments. I'm going to take a break between each segment so you can stop and pause the video, and then hopefully you'll be able to move the video to the side, open up your version of Unity, and build each of those steps yourself so you can really learn some skills and absorb them by doing them. So you go ahead and download, or you go ahead and open the application and come back to the video. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to double click on my Unity icon, get Unity started. When Unity pops up, in the upper right corner, over by my account, there's a new icon. When I click on new icon, it's going to give me the opportunity to save my project in the correct location. Let's call our project Private Island. So we're going to add some asset packages that we're going to need. I think it would be helpful to have a couple of cameras in there. We also need a character if we're going to walk around our island. I think the environment is going to be very important. We can add effects later. Anything else that you see in the shopping list, you can also add later as well. So let's just double check. We chose cameras, we chose characters, we've got an environment. Maybe we want to drive around the island or fly around the island. When we're at that level, we'll add some vehicles. But for now, so it doesn't take forever to import, let's go ahead with cameras, character, and the environment. When I'm sure I'm ready to go, I'm going to click Create Project. Unity unpacks those particular packages and sets up my project inside of that folder that we selected on our machine. Okay, as you can see, our project is loaded. So the first thing we probably want to do is just kind of get familiar with the interface if you've never used Unity before. There are 4 panels that are really important here. The one on the far left is the hierarchy panel. Everything inside of our game, like the main camera and the directional light, are accessible in this left-hand panel. If I come down here towards the bottom, there's a project panel. And in the project panel on the left side, if I had favorites, they would be listed underneath the gold star. But basically, all of those assets that we just imported are now available, and they show up here in standard assets. Here are the cameras we imported. There's the environment we imported, and some of the other folders are assets that those particular asset packages also come with. All the things that you can add to your game space are in this project panel. They're not there yet, but we can go and double click on these or drag them or add them to the hierarchy and add them to our game. On the far right is the inspector, and the inspector is important. As an example, if I find one of my characters and I click on the free look camera, my inspector will populate with all the parameters and properties that I can set for the free look camera rig. And the most important window, obviously, is this one right here in the middle. There's nothing in there right now except for what looks like a grid, a little light source, and a camera. But this is where we're going to build our game. So if you think about this, this is like a movie set in Hollywood. And there's nobody on set yet. They haven't built the set. They haven't painted anything. There's no background. There's no environment. Just a camera and a single light source. At the top is the play bar. As we build our game, we'll enter into play mode. As you can see, there's the horizon line. Turn play mode off temporarily. The scene itself has a tab at the upper left corner. It also has a game tab, which shows me my game. Can't play it yet because I haven't hit the play bar, but I can see how my game is looking. I can also go to the asset store and buy stuff from Unity if necessary. This is where people build a lot of models and a lot of assets and things to help you out and things that you can buy. But mainly, we want to learn how to make some of these things ourselves. So let's start out by setting this scene together and see if we can't come up with something like a private island in, say, 15-20 minutes. So the first thing we want to do, find some water. So if we're going to have an island, we need an ocean. Those assets are probably going to be down here in standard assets. I'm going to increase the height of this window. So I'm looking for standard assets. My assumption is they're going to be an environment. If I click on environment, there's speed tree, terrain assets, there's a water folder. So if I troll this down, let's take a peek inside the water folder. There's some basic water assets, and there are also some professional water assets. So in today's version of Unity, I'm looking for some prefabs inside of the water folder. And inside those prefabs, there's Water Pro Daytime and there's Water Pro at Night. So I'm going to grab the Water Pro Daytime item, and I'm going to add it to my hierarchy list, and it drops in to my scene window. The default Water Pro Daytime is a little bit small. So what we want to do, why don't we try to increase the size of this a little bit? So the first thing we want to do is figure out where this element just dropped into our world. So with it selected, and if it's not selected, click on it in the hierarchy panel. Check the inspector over here on the right side. So if I move my mouse over to the right side and I look at the parameters for Water Pro Daytime, I see that its position in the XYZ coordinate, it's at 0. So its center transformation point is at 0. It's not rotated anyway. It does have a scale of 16. So what does 16 mean in Unity's world? Well, each unit is essentially based on how you perceive it, whether it's inches, millimeters, or whatever your measurement system. So if this is 16 units, it's kind of going to be adequate for a pool, but we want it to be the ocean. So let's take the scale and increase the scale to, how about 1,000? 1,000 to 1,000 gives me a perfect sphere that's 1,000 units wide. Our island's only going to be about maybe 500 units. So we've got plenty of space for the water there. So after setting those values, I think we want to save our project here. Let's go save scene. And I'm going to call this Island 1. This gives me the opportunity to have multiple islands to test and to work with. So I'm going to start with Island 1. That's the name of that scene. It's saved. It's protected. We can go to work now. Let's go hit the play button and see what we got. Okay, we've got a nice, open, all the way to the horizon, Water Pro Daytime. Love it. I'm going to step back. If we've got the ocean in place, our next bet is to add terrain. So let's go over that again. I open a new document, ask for a new project. I imported camera, I imported characters, and I imported environment. Then, once Unity opened up and gave me this nice little blank scene, I was able to go back down here into the standard assets, and I was looking for water. Once I found water, I saw that there's a couple of different water. There's water 4, there's water with all of these different elements, but I'm looking for a prefab, something that's already constructed for me. Inside the prefab, there's two flavors, Water Pro Daytime, Water Pro Nighttime. I chose Water Pro Daytime and I dragged it into the hierarchy panel, and sure enough, by increasing the scale to 1,000 to 1,000, my water disk, which is centered at XYZ000, is ready to go. Tested it, looked good to me, and now I'm going to come back after this first segment, and we'll do segment 2 and add some terrain. Okay, in this next segment, we need to add some terrain that's going to make up our island. So, where can we get some land in this broad ocean that we've just developed? In Unity's Game Object menu, you have the ability to find 3D objects, and inside of 3D objects, there are some cubes, there's some spheres, some capsules, but most importantly, there's a terrain object. As soon as I drop that terrain object out, and I'm going to zoom out just a little bit and kind of show you where this is, you'll notice its upper left corner is back there at 0, 0. So this terrain object by default is 500 units by 500 units wide. It's a square. So to center it in the middle of where our water prototype is, what we can do is we can change its position in the X. Let's go with a negative 250 and see where that moves it. So that moves it up over to the right, and then a negative 250 in the Z puts its center at the center of the water daytime prefab. Now if you look carefully, it seems like some of the area is peeking through the water. Well, it's sharing the same exact height elevation as the water. So if we want to be able to walk around our island and have some areas on side the island that are submerged underneath the ocean level, let's drop this Y value, the up and down value. Let's go negative 5 units, and it drops it underneath the water. So our objective is to raise the terrain through the water, so parts of the terrain are peaking above the water, and that's what we're going to walk on when we travel around our private island. So the big question is, now that I've got this terrain in place, and I might want to position this a little bit differently. I'm going to look a little bit further down on top of it without necessarily coming from a top view. There are some objects, there are some buttons on the terrain portion of the inspector. If you run your cursor over these buttons, well, this one will raise or lower terrain. This will paint height on the terrain that you raise and lower. This will smooth the height, and this will actually paint textures. So first we need to raise and lower the terrain. So when I select this, my options are I can use some brushes here. So I'm going to pick some brushes to give it a little bit of a random structural feel to it. Now let's try this one and see how this looks. So as you can see, okay, so if I move this around, I've got a nice little area here, like a little inlet, and it has some peaks and valleys. They're pretty sharp though. So I can change this by changing the brush size. If I increase the brush size, now it paints a broader area. If I decrease it, it's tinier. The opacity governs how much of the brushstroke affects the region. So as you can see, when I increased the opacity, I held the mouse button down shortly, and it gave me some really spiky regions there. If I would lower the opacity, I have to kind of push the mouse around, and as you can see at 0, I'm getting no elevation whatsoever. If I even bring it up slightly, a little bit more elevation, but nowhere near as spiky as that region right there. So I'm going to stick with the defaults here. I want an island that has some water in the interior and some areas in the outside to investigate. So I think I will smooth this out a little bit. So I will increase the brush size. I'm going to come around and kind of blend those areas and kind of make things. Yeah, I got a nice little area there with some really high peaks, a couple of interior pond areas there. That's a little bit too much. I want to undo that. So I'll very gently increase the height over here. So there's a couple of other objects here. If you go too far, you can raise and lower. So now I can actually paint the height, or I can hold my other key, my alternating key, and flatten the height. So that puts a nice plateau on the top of those. There's also the ability to smooth the region. So instead of making it so difficult to walk around our island because it's so craggy, I'm going to soften it up a little bit, especially over here in this area. So those high peaks, they're going to be hard to climb if they're too spiky. We'll get caught in the little areas there. The texture itself, well, there's no texture right now. You see it's kind of looks like a white snowy area. So when I select the texture, I want to add an actual texture to my surface. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can see this a little bit better. So I went and picked out the little paintbrush tool. And it's telling me I can paint texture, but we have to select a texture. Otherwise, we're painting nothing. So down here below the brushes. There's a texture area. When you see no terrain textures defined, we have to click Edit Texture to add a texture. And this little window pops up. It says Add Terrain Texture. So inside this dialog box, we've got a couple of options here. I need a red, green, and blue smoothness channel, and it's called albedo in Unity's terminology. So when I click Select, it brings up my texture dialogs, my options that are available in those standard assets that we imported. So the texture I'm concerned with, it's kind of a deserty island, so I'm going to choose the sand albedo. When I click on that, and I click Add, you see what it does. It added the entire sand as the kind of the default basic texture of my island. And that's going to be fine, but if we take a peek at it right now, you'll see that not all that interesting. Everything is just sand. So we're going to punch it up a little bit, make it a little bit more interesting. We're going to add another texture, and then we'll paint that other texture on top of our sand texture. So I'm going to add, how about we look for something that looks like a rocky kind of region for the higher elevation. So here's something called grass rock. So if I double click on grass rock and I add that, it loads it onto my brush. I'm going to select this new texture with my paintbrush. I'm going to increase the brush size a little bit, bump the opacity, bump the target strength, and kind of lay this into a couple of different regions there. So now if I zoom out a little bit, maybe take this from the top, you'll see that if I paint along this area, let's zoom out a little bit. As you can see, on the terrain in this area right here, I should have some lichen, some green grass. So in this arena here, with my terrain selected, I think we'll add some more textures here. So I'm going to edit texture. I'm going to find something that's a little bit more higher contrast than that rocky area. I am going to add some grassy hills texture to this. So I've added the grassy texture here. I'm going to come around here and then paint over this one portion of the island. We'll make all of that kind of greenish grassy. And then on these hills, let's add another texture. So there's a texture that is kind of a rocky cliff type. And they call this texture, I'm going to try Capo 2. So Capo 2 should give me the ability to kind of load structures on the roofs of these mountains that look a little bit more rocky, less vegetation. And then I'm going to reset this so we can take a peek at this. Maybe put some of those rocky portions on the top. Give it a little bit of, we'll blend them together. So by changing the opacity, I can actually kind of cut some portions of those rocky scrags and put a little bit of grass back in this area, maybe add a little bit of sand at the top. And I get the kind of painterly areas here. So I'm going to maybe add a little bit of sand at a lower opacity in some of these regions just to give it a little bit of more realism. Let's take a peek at what that looks like from the camera view. So now I've got a little bit more vegetation in the area. And this is all kind of nice, except for the fact that we want to be able to walk around on the island itself. So our next segment is adding a character that allows us to explore our new private island. Do you remember what I just did? Try this yourself. Pause the video, move it to the side, open up Unity, and make sure that you understand how to raise the terrain, paint texture, which means that first you have to go and add those textures that you want to paint with. And they will be here in the asset selector. Use the paintbrushes, use the opacity of the paintbrushes and the size of the paintbrushes to affect the region. Go ahead and paint over those areas, give it a little bit more of a variety to it. Take a peek at it by looking at it in game mode and get excited because it's about time to add a character in the next segment. Okay, we've got the island, and it looks kind of nice. It'd be great to take some pictures of it, but we want to be able to walk around and investigate our island. So the next step is to add a character, and we already have a number of characters because if you remember when we did our initial asset import, we brought in, and I'm going to scoot this window over so we can actually see this a little bit better, we brought in a whole folder in standard assets that contains characters. So just like we were able to find environments, here are some characters. In the first person character, we have some prefabs. So we have people that are already built here. The prefab we should probably try. Let's go with the rigid body for right now. It comes built in with a camera. I'm going to drag it to the hierarchy. And then if I double click on it, it should drive me to where that model is in the scene itself. As you can see, it kind of chucked it in the middle, and I've got a little pond in the middle, so I'm probably underwater here. So I'm going to increase the Y value, and I also probably need to get myself on top of some land. Actually, I'm below the land, so I'm going to come up through the land and scoot over a little bit and try to get myself. I'm increasing my height in the Y value, so when I play, I don't drop through the ground and end up on the other side of the prefab water, which means I'm going to drop through the world and end up in outer space. So I'm going to play this and see if he actually, there he goes. Now I can actually walk. And with using my WSD keys, I can patrol my little island here and take a look at some of that vegetation that we just built. Since I've got a built-in camera, I can look all the way around. But there's your water surface. So you can actually enter the water. You can actually go under the water. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to pause this for a second. And you know what? I've got a better idea. Let's find this character. Let's move him all the way up in the air here. And then the objective is to scoot him over. Let's see if we can't get him on top of this hill over here. So he'll have a nice view of the entire island here. You can check by going all the way around in the different views and using the little conical navigator here. Try to get that to the top. Let's go to a top view. Now you can pretty much see he is on top of that plateau. The question is, when I hit play, is he on top of the hillside? Yes, he is. So he's in that flat area. And I can look out over my island and determine where I'd like to explore next. It's a nice island, but it's kind of a desert island. I think it'd be a good idea to learn how to add more vegetation to this. Just to give you a quick preview, I think we should add some trees. So let's do a search for trees. Here it is. There's speed tree. I typed in tree over here, and I did a search for it, and sure enough, it found inside of environment a folder called speed tree assets. Inside of speed tree, there are broadleaf folders, there's some conifers, and there's some palms. Okay, so to get some trees out here on this nice little plateau that we're standing on, our first objective from raise and lower is we're going to go over here and we're going to click on place trees. Now, just like you had to add your own textures, we have to add our trees. So when I click on add tree here, or edit tree, it brings up the add tree dialog box. The tree prefab doesn't have any trees in it. So if I click on this little circle, it allows me to see all the prefabs that are loaded in my assets. I'm looking for that palm tree that I was looking at earlier. So sure enough, here's a palm, and I think it might work pretty well for a desert island. So if I double click on that, it should load that. It's added now. It starts to work. I'm going to click add. The brush size, maybe a little bit smaller, so I can have a smaller region, control how many palm trees are in that region. I think the tree density, just a very similar setting to opacity. The fewer trees in one area, as you can see, or we can have more trees. So if I go down here, I can have a lot of trees down there in the valley. I'll just have a few of them up here on the plateau where we're standing. And the height, there's a little random slider, so there are a lot of great tools for playing with these trees. There's also wind that we can apply, and we'll learn about that in another segment. Let's see how our game works right now. So if I click the play button, there it is. There are my trees. There's my desert island. I think this could use a little wind, but we'll have to learn about that in the next lesson. As for right now, I'm excited. I've got to quit this particular tutorial and learn about my island over here. So sure enough, I've got my own private island. It's time to go and explore it. Hope you had fun with this particular tutorial. Come back very soon and I'll show you some more advanced features of Unity, how to get started and where to go. Thanks for watching. SFJ Academy, the principal.